I'm Kyle Snyder, retired National Guard, Afghanistan combat wounded 2012.
My grandfather, Lou Stokely, suffers from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. He served first in the National Guard and in the United States Army from 1960 to 1972.
I just hit my 20th anniversary in the reserves in October. And of that 20 years, 2 of them were spent on deployment. The first one was in 2000 and 2001 when we were deployed to Bosnia. And then in 2004, 2005, we were in Afghanistan.
PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a mental health condition that is triggered by a terrifying event, whether it's experienced or even witnessed. When one experiences trauma, it doesn't just end when the event of the trauma has ended. Reactions such as vivid, upsetting memories of what triggered the trauma may occur, along with increased anxiety, negative feelings, or insomnia. In fact, these symptoms occur more often than not in people after the experience of a life-threatening event.
PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is something not just from the military, but also could be from sexual trauma, it could be from rape, car accident. So the misconception of people with PTSD are either police officers, military, first responders isn't true.
People who, in my experience, who have PTSD, it ranges in their severity. And there's a lot of differences in how people cope or choose to not cope with PTSD. I have had some friends, people that I have served with, and acquaintances that I have served with that couldn't handle their PTSD and took their own lives. I have known many more who work through with therapy and with their church or their synagogue, particularly with family members. Going through family therapy, it helps a lot of folks because family members need to know how to deal with their soldiers' PTSD.
One of the things that worked for me was being able to talk about it and realize that I had it and wanted to help people that also had it. And I recommend that if you feel like you've got PTSD, to talk to somebody about it. You don't have to sit down and let everything out, but it's a lot easier to make it easier on yourself if you start talking to somebody.
When diagnosing PTSD, the focus is on 4 symptoms: re-experiencing, arousal, avoidance, and the negative changes in what one believes or how they feel. The duration of each symptom must exist for more than a month. Regardless of how the symptoms and criterion are defined, everyone experiences PTSD differently, and everyone heals from PTSD differently. This typically depends on how their PTSD is being treated, as well as what the transition back into civilian life is like for the individual soldier.
I have a very close friend who is in my current unit that I did not deploy with to Afghanistan. He deployed to Iraq twice, has been in the military about 25 years, and had a couple of confirmed kills on his last deployment to Iraq. And, a decade later from when he returned, he's not the same as he was before. He will go through periods of time where he will be triggered by something, whether it's a movie or something somebody says, sometimes even just a loud noise. If we're out on a training site and he hears a loud noise, and it's almost like a cloud washes over his face, and you can see that he's being transported back to a dark place. PTSD definitely impacts different people in different ways. I think that anybody who has deployed on a combat mission or in a war zone comes back a changed person, and everybody goes through that initial shock of coming back into civilian life.
We've come far in what we've learned about PTSD. We know more about the disorder now than we did even 5 or 10 years ago. The DSM is always changing in its definition and requirements for PTSD due to the knowledge that we've gained. Despite all that we've learned in recent years, there are still issues and gaps in our knowledge. A lot of biological aspects of PTSD are still fuzzy to us, even more so how to treat the disorder is often a very imperfect process, especially due to the fact that PTSD is not the same for everyone. Many of the misconceptions can be observed in this real-life account of living with PTSD.
One might have noticed that these years coincided with the middle of the Vietnam War. However, my grandfather's PTSD did not come from a traumatic experience on the front lines of Vietnam, but from a simple domestic violence call that went haywire in East Winston-Salem in the year 1970. During our interview, my grandfather wanted to address the common misconceptions associated with PTSD. He said, anyone can get shot. It doesn't matter where you are. You don't have to be in Afghanistan, Iraq, or even associated with the military. Mine happened right here in my hometown, Winston-Salem, while on the job. The day it happened, my grandfather was tiptoeing around the edge of the house in which the call was made when he was shot in the head from the porch by 72-year-old Lawrence Harris. The newspaper article on the story reads, "A shotgun blast rang out and Stokely yelled, 'I am hit.' Thankfully, he survived, but did not come away unscathed. He immediately knew something was off within him following the accident. He was irritable, sensitive to loud noises and crowds, and short-tempered. He happened to stumble across a brochure for PTSD one day and found that he had 8 of the 10 telltale symptoms of PTSD. He went to the doctor and was soon prescribed medication that he still takes to this day. He still has the shotgun pellets in his back, skull, forehead, and his sinuses. He is still extremely affected by this and still has the troubles with loud noises, crowds, short-temperedness, and not feeling like he is in control. Because of an event that happened 46 years ago, my grandfather was unable to watch me graduate high school because he was not able to sit in the Coliseum due to the excessive amount of people and the loud echoing noises. Yes, PTSD is manageable, but it doesn't go away, and anyone, not just military personnel, are subject to it."
The most frequented form of treatment is through the use of pharmaceuticals. USA Today reports that veterans suffering from PTSD are almost 5 times as likely to be prescribed drugs than those veterans who aren't suffering from a mental health issue. There are many problems with this, including addiction. Addiction to one source of relief can also increase the risk of addiction to another, which can mentally and physically destroy an individual who originally only wanted to get better.
It's Walter Reed National Naval Medical Center up in Bethesda, Maryland, and they're equipped for more combat wounded veterans, amputees, veterans who come back with do limb salvage and things like that, other than just your regular Army hospital. So you'll see double amputees, and in my case I actually saw a quadruple amputee up there. And usually the average stay is usually anywhere from a year to maybe 4 or even 5 years. That we've seen, soldiers that have actually had 2 or 3 kids while they've been up there, just going through the rigorous therapy and treatment. When I was at Walter Reed, I did something called brain therapy, which helped to try to take away the triggers of PTSD. The silent is what they call the silent killers of PTSD. So getting my mind and my function back in order was one of the things I did. It was a 4-week program that seemed to have helped.
So there are definitely issues with, the methods that are being currently used to help our soldiers deal with PTSD. And so that's one thing that I really do hope gets resolved in the very near future, just because, you see the statistics, 22 veterans a day are committing suicide. And you can't blame all of that on PTSD, but you damn sure can bet that PTSD plays a part in some of those 22 soldiers every day. PTSD is something that we have to deal with. We have to do a better job as a country dealing with our soldiers and taking care of our vets that come back. And whatever role you're in, whether you're a family member or you're an employee or an employer or a friend or a neighbor of somebody who comes back from combat and it appears that they have PTSD, or they come right out and say, I have PTSD. It's our job just to work with them and help them however.
One of the things at home is like I said, you can talk to a family member, support groups. There are organizations, VFWs, American Legions, you got Wounded Warrior Project, Operation Warfighter. But in your area, look up organizations. If you don't feel comfortable talking to a doctor, I recommend that you don't. There are people and organizations out there, and you also have counselors at VA hospitals as well.